expert, Rochelle Pavlin of BBSI of Central Washington and Northeast Oregon. She is here today to answer some questions for you about HR concerns and employee retention going forward. We do have a couple of pre-submitted questions that we'll get to, but I'm going to throw it over to Amy to do introductions of our group so Rochelle has a better idea of who is here today.
So before we go into the introductions, Rochelle, we usually ask those that are on this call to be respectful, be kind, be patient. With technology, sometimes we run into some difficulties, but we really hope that this webinar is informational and it provides some guidance for those. And then if you could, at the end of the presentation, if some businesses would like to connect with you, we would love to give that offering to them because obviously we're not in the HR profession, so we would love for them to be able to contact someone that can help them along the way. So again, thank you everybody for coming, and I usually read from the screen and just ask you as a participant your name and who you're representing so that Rochelle has an idea of who she's speaking to. So we'll start with Gordon. We'll skip over Gordon, but if I think it is Gordon Swan from Herbert and Snowden Insurance. Ellensburg Floral.
Don't forget to unmute yourself, guys.
Yes. Dottie. We'll move to Jay Strader. Is that how you say that last name? We got a chat. Says, sorry, I don't have microphone hooked up. It's Jen with Kittitas Valley Health Care. So Jay Strader is Jen from the KVH. And Emily.
My name's Emily Massa. I'm the communications manager for the Kittitas County Chamber of Commerce.
And man, they're testing me on my English. Is it Brandis?
Yep, this is Brandis Van Ederson, Director of HR at Shoemaker Manufacturing in Cle Elum.
Oh, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
And then Josh.
Josh Crawford, General Manager at the Daily Record here in Ellensburg.
And then it does look like Dottie Rogers from Ellensburg Floral is trying to get on here. So, and as we move forward, we'll have some people add themselves. And so if you are a participant and you have any questions, please use the chat function like Gemma had mentioned, and we will answer any questions that we can through the chat function. And so Gemma, if you'd like to introduce Rochelle again and we can get going.
Yeah, Rochelle, if you'd like to take just a few seconds to introduce yourself, what you do, and any information that you have before we get into the questions.
Sure. First of all, thank you for inviting me. My name is Rochelle Pavlin, and I am a human resources consultant with BBSI, and I work with small to mid-sized clients throughout Central Washington and Northeast Oregon as part of a PEO, or Professional Employer Organization, administrative support team. It's me, a safety manager, payroll specialist, and a recruiting specialist, and the four of us together work to support those clients that maybe aren't big enough to have their own individuals in those roles. So we are there to assist them with those needs. I am not their internal HR department, I am their HR consultant, and so that is how I am here with you today. One of my clients in Yakima is the Yakima County Development Association, and they do a lot of stuff along with the Yakima Chamber and the Kittitas Chamber, etc. So we're all kind of connected together that way. if one of your companies feels that you might benefit from services such as BBSI offers, or if you want to learn more about it, please let me know after this call. In the meantime, I will start with the questions that were submitted up front, but while I'm addressing those, please do use that chat feature and enter any questions you can think of about all this crazy return to work stuff after COVID-19. I will not promise that I can answer everything, but I will do my best. And if I don't know the answer, hopefully I know the right direction for us to look in. So one of the first questions that I received was, are my employees able to apply for unemployment insurance if there is a reduction in their hours? So according to, and my source is the Washington Employment Security Department website. According to the website, they have a section under temporary layoffs. And it says, since unemployment benefits are determined on a weekly basis, full-time workers, excuse me, whose hours of work are reduced by 1 day or less each week may not be eligible for partial employment benefits because they earn too much in the week to be eligible. That being said, it really depends on how much money they make. If there's a chart out on the ESD website that will let people calculate if they're working, for example, 16 hours a week and they used to work 40 hours a week, they can be eligible for unemployment insurance in most cases. So it really depends on the number of hours they previously worked, because ESD is going to look back at the previous time frame to get an average number of hours worked, and then what their hours have been cut from. If it's cut from 40 to 20, or if it's cut from 40 to 38, there's going to be a different answer to the question. So there is no one right answer. It really depends on each employee individually. What I do recommend is that if any of your employees are suffering from a reduction in hours due to what is going on in our environment right now, I strongly recommend that they do file a claim. The ESD will let them know whether or not they're eligible based on their history of work. So before I move on to the next question, any clarification needed on that? Okay, I'm not seeing anything in the chat. So I'll move on to the next question. That was, am I required to pay an employee who is prohibited from returning to work based on a belief they may have been exposed to COVID-19? Well, that question is a little confusing for me, because either they're prohibited or they're not, but being prohibited from returning to work isn't necessarily based on a belief. So if somebody is exposed or believes they have been exposed to COVID-19, according to the CDC, they are supposed to self-quarantine for 14 days. If they are told by a healthcare provider, for example, if a family member has COVID-19, has tested positive, and they live in that same house, most likely the healthcare provider is telling the entire family, you all need to self-quarantine so that you don't potentially spread the virus. If that is the case, if they have a recommendation from a healthcare provider, the health department, anything like that, then the FFCRA emergency sick leave applies. And that is a wonderful emergency benefit, because although the employer pays those sick leave hours up to 2 weeks or 80 hours for a full-time person, this is also based on their an employee's average pay. But it's up to 80 hours if somebody normally works 40 hours a week. But then emergency sick leave, even though the employer pays it out, you get to apply for a tax credit on the back end that will reimburse you for your costs of paying out that emergency sick leave. If the employee has been exposed, a family member has COVID-19, and they're taking care of that family member, then there's the emergency FMLA, or I'm sorry, it's called expanded FMLA under the emergency FFCRA Act, that will allow them to be paid 2/3 of their regular wage. And that pay is also reimbursable to the employer through a tax credit later on. If neither of those things apply and the person just, went to a party they shouldn't have gone to, thinks they got exposed, but they're not really sure, and they're not going to the doctor, and they're not seeking diagnosis, then you can certainly have them off on a 14-day quarantine, self-quarantine based on the CDC guidelines, and they can apply for unemployment insurance under the emergency rules, which applies if a worker does not meet the FFCRA requirements. So I know there's a lot going on there. The ESD has what they call a COVID-19 Scenarios and Benefits Available chart, and it's a pretty nice tool to figure out for you employers to figure out which sort of leave does your employee qualify for. So I strongly recommend that you take a look at that if you have not already. Any question? Oh, wait, will the employer be contacted if there was a direction from a health provider? Well, the employer won't be contacted. It's up to the employer to ask the employee for that direction. So they are trying to do the contact tracing. I always say that wrong. Contact tracing. It's not 100% yet. The various health departments are working on it. If somebody does test positive and they're able to successfully contact trace back to the place of employment, they will certainly let the place of employment know. Next question. Does an employer just have to provide the information only, or do they help them through the benefits? Oh, well, hopefully you all have posted the required poster that talks about the FFCRA sick leave and expanded FMLA, because that's a requirement for all employers to have that posted. And if you don't have employees at work, if you had to send them all home, then you're supposed to send it to them. It's available in PDF in 14 different languages, I think. I think it's 14. At least English and Spanish. Those are the only two copies I have, but I know it's available in other languages. So the employee should be aware of the available sick leave, and then it's up to the employer to help the employee determine which one of the 6 qualified reasons they fall under, and then follow your own internal practices with regard to notification. If somebody calls in sick, what are your notification requirements? They should follow the same requirements. The CDC and other government agencies have suggested that employers be a little more lenient, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't cover your bases. It's important for you to be sure that you have appropriate documentation, so later on when you're requesting that tax refund to cover the cost of the FFCRA leave, that you have all of your ducks in a row as well. So there are some guidelines on the website, for the FFCRA that talk you through that step-by-step, bullet by bullet. So I strongly recommend, if you do have an employee that's going to use one of those forms of leave, that you check that out. Also, if you work with a payroll company, or if you're already partnered with a PEO, be sure to ask that company if they are processing your tax credits for you. I know here at BBSI, for all of our employees, or our clients whose employees have had to use either of the FCRA, that's how we say it fast, FFCRA, the FCRA leaves, either the emergency paid sick leave or the expanded family medical leave, we are processing their tax credits immediately for them on that actual invoice when the leave was used, and then we're doing the work in the background to get the money back from the federal government. Some payroll specialists, or I'm sorry, payroll companies and PEOs are doing that, some are not, but it's worth it to you to, if you work with one of those companies, to ask them. Okay, let's see. The third question, and this is a doozy. Can I, as an employer, require an employee suspected of exposure to be tested before returning to work? That all depends on who you ask. According to the CDC website, employers should not require a COVID-19 test result or a healthcare provider's note for employees who are sick to validate their illness, qualify for sick leave, or return to work. Under the Americans with Disabilities Act, employers are permitted to require a doctor's note from your employees to verify that they are healthy and able to return to work. However, in this time when we're asked to be a little more lenient, be aware that a healthcare provider and their offices and other medical facilities are extremely busy, and they may not be able to provide that documentation right away. It might be a week or two before you ever get that. So be a little understanding there. Most, and think about this as well, most people with COVID-19 have a mild illness. Some people don't even realize they had the virus, and they can recover at home without any medical care by following the CDC recommendations, you know, the 14 days stay at home, self-quarantine, and then they're able to come back to work. They may have never seen a doctor, so they may not have that doctor's note, and they may not have the opportunity to be tested until such time where you can just say, hey, I just want to be tested. Right now, they're still short on test kits, on swabs and that sort of thing. So if you're not showing symptoms, it's very likely that you are not going to be able to get tested unless you were tested up front. Then your doctor may do a post-symptom test for you as well. But if you never were tested up front, they may not ever do that post-symptom test for you. So the CDC website has a lot of information on that. They have a whole section on coronavirus, as you can imagine. Let's see. Okay, no additional questions in the chat on that one. And then another question I received was, what options do my employees have if they have been furloughed? According to the Employment Security Department, if an employee is placed on furlough, they may apply for unemployment, and the ESD will determine if they're eligible. Once again, it depends. Are they completely furloughed? What kind of hours did they work in the past year? That sort of thing. So if they just graduated from high school, they never had a job before, they worked for a week and then they got furloughed, chances are they might not be eligible for unemployment benefits because they don't have that time in that they have to have in order to collect unemployment benefits. And also if they normally worked 40 hours and now suddenly they're working 35, depending on what their rate of pay is, they may not be eligible for unemployment benefits. One of the things that a lot of employers worry about, I've had a lot of my clients ask me this, is I got my PPP loan and I want to pay my employees, but they're really happy to get the extra $600 that they're getting until the middle of July. And I don't want to screw that up for them, but can I at least partially pay them? And the question is maybe. Once again, it depends on how much they make. There is that chart that they have on the ESD website that you can look at. And it's, you know, if you're getting paid between $0 and $12, then, you know, it's this much is going to come off and this much is going to come off. It's a 4-page chart because it goes dollar range by dollar range. As long as an employee is receiving at least $1 of unemployment insurance, they're eligible for that extra $600. So if you're worried about being able to spend your PPP loan appropriately so you can get loan forgiveness, take a look at that chart out on the ESD website. I have a question here. What about sole proprietors? Seems unemployment is hard to get. Yes, in general, standard, traditional, whatever you want to call it, unemployment is very difficult for self-employed or sole proprietors. In this time of COVID-19, with the emergency, the CARES Act that went into effect, there is indeed unemployment insurance benefit available for sole proprietors, independent contractors, and that sort of thing. The sole proprietors were also eligible for PPP loans, and I understand there's still a little bit of that money left. So if you're a sole proprietor and you haven't applied, you might want to talk to your favorite bank. It is, I can tell you, still taking a long time at the ESD. The state announced yesterday that next week is callback week. So they're taking almost no incoming calls because they're trying to return all the calls to clear up all of the claims that are being held up. I can also tell you from personal experience that there are some fraudulent claims going on out there. Somebody filed a claim in my name with the unemployment with ESD for an unemployment insurance claim. I've been working more than full-time since all of this started, as you guys can imagine, answering questions for my clients. My boss thought it was a little amusing that he received in the mail a unemployment claim for me when I was sitting right here in the office. There is a section on the ESD website that tells you how to deal with fraud. So the employee themselves has to submit the, whoever the fraud was done against. In my case, it was me. I had to submit a fraud report to the ESD, and it's pretty easy. They give you the steps, what's your full name, what's your address, send a picture of your driver's license to prove you're you, and that kind of thing, and what happened. And basically, when your employer receives that notice in the mail, or you as the employers receive that notice in the mail, if your employee is still working, you could say, hey, I know you didn't submit this because you're here working, so you might want to report this fraud. And they want to report that fraud because if somebody else is getting paid out in their name, and then you're doing your regular quarterly reporting and it turns out that you're paying your employee, then your employee is going to get fined for being overpaid under unemployment. So they definitely want to address that. If one of those fraudulent claims come in, don't just throw those away. Any other questions out there?
I think that is it from the pre-submitted questions. If you have a question, if you're attending this meeting right now, use the chat function. If you're not able to use the chat function, go ahead and unmute yourself and we will get to your question now.
I say, because I can sit and talk about things that might be of interest to people.
We just got another one from the chat. What if the employee finds the job recall?
Oh, this is another one of my favorites. So, the most important thing to do is, well, it depends. There's two pieces to this question. If you applied for and received a PPP loan, you want to make sure that you offered that return to work in writing and that you get the decline from the employee in writing, because that way it won't count against you when it comes to loan forgiveness. So that has been addressed in the FAQ with regard to the PPP loans on the SBA website. So if you do have that PPP loan and one of your employees refuses to come to work, make sure you made the offer in writing. It doesn't have to be formal on, embossed letterhead, email, text, whatever, just something that you can keep record of. And that you get that decline from that employee in writing. If they call you and say, no, I don't want to come to work, I'm scared or whatever, respond back to them in writing. I am confirming that you said this when you called me on this day and this time. And, just so you have it all in writing, because that way when you're submitting your records for your loan forgiveness and you submit that as well, that won't count against you in terms of, because you were willing to pay that money out, the employee refused to come to work. The other thing you need to consider if the employee decides not to come to work is you can then go on the ESD website, log in with your SAW, Secure Access Washington account, and report that the employee refused to come to work, because as we all know, unemployment insurance is for people who are willing and able to work. And your employee has just told you that they are not willing and able to work. And therefore they no longer are eligible for unemployment insurance. So you might want to remind your employee of that when they tell you they don't want to come back to work. Now, if they're saying they don't want to come back to work because they're sick, then you don't want them to come back to work because you don't want them to get the rest of your team sick. And they do have available the emergency sick leave under the FFCRA. So I'm going to ask you guys all a question. How many people have their required poster posted? You can either use the little raise your hand thing or comment in the chat. Nobody's answering. You guys are scaring me a little bit here. They actually said there's a fine if you don't post this poster. I'm going to see if I can pull it up here on my screen. And then maybe I can share my screen.
KVH definitely has it posted.
Yay. Okay, good. Excellent. All right, I'm seeing some people that have it. Okay, if you're not sure what I'm looking about or talking about, Can you see it now? Did I do it right?
Yes, it is shown.
Okay, it says employee rights across the top with a picture of the virus behind it.
Yes.
Yeah, this is a poster. It's only a little 1-page, 8.5 by 11 flyer. So if you don't have it, get it up there. Once again, it's available in English, Spanish, and multiple other languages. And it's helpful for you as well. So when your employees start asking you, you know, I'm sick, what do I do? Well, let's see. If they are experiencing COVID-19 symptoms and seeking a medical diagnosis, that comes under qualifying reason number 3, as it tells you up under paid leave entitlements. For reasons 1 through 3, they get to be paid 100% of their regular salary, up to $511 per day, for a total of up to 80 hours. That's based on their average pay. So if they normally work 35 hours a week, they'd only be eligible for 70 hours. See how that works? So it's helpful for you as your employees request the leave, and it's required to be posted. So don't forget to do that. Trying to think of what other good items I have that I can share with you while we're sharing the screen. Any other new questions on there? No.
Not looking like it, but would you mind putting your contact info into the chat so if folks want to contact you after this with more questions?
Sure. I can tell you all of the, I forget that when you hit enter, it posts and it doesn't go down to the next line. Sorry about that. What is my phone number? Okay, there's my phone number, and there's my email address.
So Rochelle, I have a couple questions
Sure.
that I'll interject a little bit. So as we move into phase 2, there are some, I'm calling them my myth buster opportunities right now.
Okay.
If, so is there an HR concern that you can speak of when it comes to temperature gauging of employees and all of that privacy stuff that we've been seeing kind of float around? Can you talk a little bit about that and give some recommendations maybe for people to read about, and then later on can contact you further if needed?
Yes. So this, see if I can do this right, is a wonderful website at the CDC here, where it talks very specifically about identifying how and where workers might be exposed to COVID-19 at work, what to do if you're conducting daily in-person or virtual health checks, how to handle that. Keep in mind that the CDC does allow this, the ADA does allow this, because it is not a diagnosis, you're just looking at symptoms. Just because somebody has a fever doesn't necessarily mean they have COVID-19, but if you're checking temperature, they have a fever, you can ask them not to come to work. You are not diagnosing them with COVID-19, you have registered that they have a fever. Keep in mind that it is very important that you treat your employees fairly. You don't want to say, this group all has to submit to this temperature checking, but this group doesn't, unless there's a valid business reason for it. If your marketing group or whatever, for example, all work from home and they come in one day, then maybe on that one day they have to temperature check, but they don't have to do it while they're at home. You know, that doesn't make any sense. If people work in a building all by themselves, maybe they don't have to temperature check if they don't come in contact with other people. And maybe it's only your departments where people all work together. But I definitely recommend that link there that I posted in the chat for the CDC website, because it goes through all that step by step, what you can do, how you should store that documentation and that sort of thing, because it is medical information, so it should be kept confidential. You don't want it, you know, floating around the office. As we have all heard on news and social media, some groups of people are being targeted as the cause of COVID-19, which is terrible, because we all pass it along equally. It doesn't matter where we're from, what color our hair is, or any of that. And people always used to tell me how young I looked until COVID-19 hit. Now we all know the real color of my hair. But anyway, speaking of color of hair, Amy, you had more than one question.
Well, I'm just trying to spike conversation while we have your attention. I'm just thinking of things that I've heard. And so you talked a little bit about the temperature gauging. You talked about confidentiality. You talked about the PPP if they decline the recall to work. You talked about unemployment, the proper signage. I can't think of anything else unless something comes about, but I think you've hit a lot on some of the pieces that I've seen repeated, right? A lot of the things that have been repeated. Gemma, do you have anything else?
I say I just put the link up for the earnings deduction chart that I talked about if your employees are receiving partial pay. And then this is I'm about to put up the COVID-19, the scenarios and benefits chart that I talked about, because it's another good one that I find to be very helpful. The ESD really has gone above and beyond at this point in time with their website. Stuff isn't always super easy to find, but it's in there. Sometimes you just have to click through a couple of the links. Something that might be helpful for your employees if they're curious as to whether or not they are eligible for unemployment is this little gem that I just shared the link on. As you can tell, I was preparing for this meeting. I don't always have all of these open on my screen, but almost every day.
It looks like we did get one question in the chat.
Oh, there it is. Okay.
Yes. We've had an employee who wants to travel internationally. She believes it will only take her away for 2 weeks. Can they ask her to speak to a medical professional about that before she travels?
So that is actually one of the things that is talked about on the CDC website. And they say, let's see. So in there, the CDC says, and the reason I keep referring back to these people is, one, I'm not an attorney, I'm an HR professional. And two, if you go based on what the federal government tells you, you have a big, huge leg to stand on should anybody get mad at you in the future. So as you make decisions, feel free to copy that page from whatever government's website and put it in that personnel file as your backup for why you made your decision. But with regard to travel, the CDC has, it's called a Traveler's Health Notices website, and I would recommend, thanks Jen, I would recommend that you visit that and have your employee visit that before they travel anywhere. If your employees are traveling for their own personal as opposed to for business, you can ask them to do a 14-day quarantine when they return. You have a right to do that, because we all know that even before COVID-19, if they're flying on an airplane, airplanes are big silver tubes with germs floating around in them. Now the airlines, I got to give them credit. They've done some amazing things with social distancing, HIPAA filters, all those sorts of things, and lots of extra cleaning. But still, that's the reality. If you can't control everything that happens on that airplane for 3 or 5 or however many hours you're sitting on it. So just because you're sitting there in your mask doesn't mean the person walking down the aisle is wearing theirs when they sneeze on you. So let's see. Okay, very good. I think I got it. Yeah, and the fact that, the reason that you would ask her to do that 14-day self-quarantine is not because you're discriminating against her for traveling, but because you're worried about the health and safety of your patients and your other employees. That it's an OSHA thing. So, any other questions? I'm trying to think of other great websites for you guys too.
Yeah, if you have any frequently asked questions that you've been getting from your clients, feel free to bring those up. I think any information you have is going to be useful to people in this group and people watching it afterwards.
Okay, we talked about the employee, the employees who refuse to come back to work, document. Looking at your poster to make sure you're giving them the right type of sick leave. And, you know, there's always the Washington paid sick leave, which all hourly employees have access to, assuming they haven't used it all up already. So even if they don't meet one of those qualifications underneath the FCRA sick leave, they can always use their Washington paid sick leave if they have any available. Let me think what else. If you are going to require PPP in your workplace, you must provide it. You can't require it and not provide it. You can recommend it. Hey, you know, if you're coming back into work to protect the safety of your fellow employees, feel free to wear a cloth mask. I have one in my purse. I'm the only one here right now, so I don't have it on. But I have 3, and I transfer them out. And when I have to talk to people, I wear my mask. If my boss requires me to wear one, then he has to provide me with one. If you require your employees to wear gloves, you have to provide them with gloves, that sort of thing. We've all seen in the news, or I assume you guys have seen in the news, the places, especially out here in Yakima, the various fruit production places where employees are picketing and that sort of thing because they're saying it's not safe. Go above and beyond, take that extra step, put up those plastic sheetings, stagger people's entrance times so they're not all coming in the door at the same time. Block off the employee break room for the time being, because there's no way you can sanitize that room unless you hire somebody. And some of our clients have hired a specific person that runs around all day long and sanitizes every door handle, every surface, that sort of thing. If you can do that, that's great. If you can't, then limit access to those places that people tend to congregate. Now is not a time for congregation. I'm trying to think what else people ask me about all the time. Mostly I'm getting questions on the PPP loans. If anyone here has them, it is super important to properly document. Many of you know, if you have the PPP loan, that your 8-week period started the day that money ended up in your bank account. And right now we still do not have guidance, and I asked a CPA about it just this morning, and we still do not have complete guidance on what that 8-week period means. Is it date paid or date earned? So for example, if you got your PPP loan money in your bank on May 7th and your regular biweekly payday was Friday, May 8th, does that count, even though the work was done before you got the PPP funds, but you paid after you got them? Or look at the end of the line, you know, the work done up through the last day of your 8-week period, but you don't pay for that for maybe 3 or 4 days or a week or whatever for your next regular pay schedule. What's going to count? So keep very, very clear records with regard to your payroll expenses, your rent, your utilities, and that sort of thing. When they were paid, what period they covered, because right now we don't know what's going to count. So make sure you keep track of both types of information. And the attorneys and CPAs are also saying, don't just keep track of what was owed, like your invoice for your utilities, but also your proof of payment, whether that's your credit card statement or a canceled check or whatever. Hold on to all of that stuff. The more documentation you have, the less chance that your bank will deny your loan forgiveness. Excuse me. One of the other things that folks are asking about, there's you can apply, or you can take a Social Security tax deferment where you don't pay any Social Security taxes through the end of the year, and then you have to pay what you owe 50% in December of 2021 and 50% in December of 2022. Keep in mind, if you do decide to do that, that's great, but you're going to have a big old balloon payment, not this December, but next December and the December after, to pay all that back. And if you also have a PPP loan, the day you get that loan forgiveness, you're no longer eligible for the Social Security tax deferment. So keep very close track of those dates. Let's see what else. There's so many things, and I know as soon as we hang up, I'll be like, oh, I should have talked about. Come on, guys. I know you have some other questions for me. Make it a hard one. Something I can't answer.
If you are unable to use the chat function, feel free to unmute yourself if you have a question.
Look and see if there's.
Not seeing any, not hearing any questions. We are scheduled to go until 4 o'clock, but Rochelle, if you don't have anything else to add, or if you can't think of another of the gajillion things you've already mentioned,
There is a lot, that's for sure.
then we will go ahead and end this early. I know Amy had to step off to another meeting because I think that is everyone's life right now, is double booked things. So we will go ahead and end it here. Thank you so much to everybody who submitted pre-questions. Thank you to all of our attendees who have asked some questions here. We hope this is helpful. We're trying to do Q&A sessions, webinars weekly. Next week on Wednesday at 9:30 a.m. we will have Clean Image Services, Northwest Sanitation, and Gerald's provide a webinar Q&A session on sanitation and services they provide and products they provide. So that webinar invite will be sent out tomorrow. So keep an eye on your email. And Rochelle, do you have anything else to add?
No, I put my contact information at the bottom of the chat so people don't have to go looking for it. If you want to reach out and you have a specific question, I will do my best to answer you. Once again, I'm not an attorney, but I have spent the last 2 months, I guess it is, spending lots of overtime hours studying all this stuff, attending every training, meeting with the state, meeting with the health department, and all that other sort of thing so that we can appropriately assist our clients. So if I don't have the answer, I might know where to find it for you.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I really hope that this was informational for everyone who joined.
Thanks, Gemma. My pleasure. Sorry, I can't talk anymore.
Very good. All right. Have a great day, everybody. Thank you.
All right, bye-bye.